Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to install turbo headers on a 1994 Mazda MX6. This is the hot pipes for your turbo application. It's going to consist of a turbo collector pipe that will bring the hot exhaust air up into the engine bay, a turbo downpipe that will bring it out of the engine bay, header primaries, and a wastegate there. The first step is going to be to jack up your car and set it on jack stands and make sure that it is nice and secure so it doesn't fall on you while you're under it. You also want to jack it up very high because you're going to need lots of room to work under there. With your car jacked up in the air, you'll see the parts that you need to remove, which is going to be this turbo Y pipe in my case, and if you don't have the same brand NA headers as you do turbo headers, you will need to remove the header primaries, which are up in the engine bay, but I'm going to start by removing those bolts there on those flanges. Before you can remove the collector pipes, you're going to need to remove the side-to-side cross member. I believe those are 17 or 19 millimeter bolts. Go ahead and drop that down. Okay, so once you've got your rear cross member off, you can go ahead and undo the bolts that connect the collector pipes to the primaries. After you've got the bolts off the header primaries, you need to take your bolts off where it attaches to your catalytic converter, and then you should be able to slip everything off right off of those two hangers. With all your bolts loose, you should be able to just pull off your Y pipe here. Once you got your Y pipe down and hanging, you should be able to remove, I've got one more bolt holding it to that. Should be able to pull that out and then just slide it towards the back and get the whole thing out. Okay, so I've got the two Y pipes next to each other. This is your naturally aspirated one, where the exhaust comes in and out the back of the car. This is your turbo one, where it's going to come in and up into the engine bay. This is side by side. After you've removed your collector pipe, which is located there, and the other one's back over there, once you remove that, then you need to remove your air intake so that the hot pipes can come up into the engine bay. So to get these headers up into the engine bay, you're going to have to cut the shroud a little bit. Doesn't matter if the shroud touches the pipes because it will melt. Also, make sure that you replace your, if you wrapped it and used normal zip ties, make sure that you replace them with stainless steel zip ties at this time. So on the ends, you're going to want to put your gaskets and your RTV copper, ultra copper, which is exhaust gasket material, on either side of the gasket. Follow the instructions on that, and you're going to want to do that before you put it up along the bottom of the car. So the problem I've run into is that these two flanges don't line up like they should. They never do. So I'm going to need to use a winch or something to pull this pipe that way until it lines up enough to slip some bolts in. So that's how far off it is. So I went ahead and took off the wastegate so that I could have a little bit more playroom, and I'm gonna have my brother, I've got a bar in the up pipe, and I'm gonna have my brother walk it sideways, and hopefully I'll be able to get those bolts through. It's not a problem once you get a few heat cycles through it, it'll relax into position, but that's what I'm gonna try and do before this gasket stuff sets up. I got the bolts in. It's taken probably about an hour just to get this side. I still don't have that one bolt in, but I'm working on trying to get it through. But you can see how it goes across the engine bay and up into it. It's actually touching that, it's touching that, and all the shrouds, which will melt away after it gets hot, but I just need to get that bolt through so I can suck that down a little bit. And then we're going to be able to work on getting the downpipe in. Well, I've snapped my up pipe. That's just being held on by the header wrap. As you can see down in there, it's snapped. Let's see if I can, yeah. So the header collector pipe gets to come off the car, get taken to an exhaust shop, and have the bad section cut out and re-welded and re-header wrapped, resprayed, and then we'll reinstall it. So it looks like my OEM headers are going back on right now. Yeah, fun day. So back underneath the car, you can see the cause of the break was this radiator hose, the bottom radiator hose. It pushed right against it and it broke, so I'm going to have to trim that and make that corner a little bit smaller. So I don't know how well you guys can see this, but this is the lower radiator hose. And that is going to be in the way of the turbo up pipe. You see how this is touching the air filter for my cold air intake there? Well, the turbo up pipe comes to about right around there. So what I'm going to plan to do is, you see how that's really long, that elbow there? It doesn't need to be. So I'm going to cut it right about there and just sort of make it eliminate that large section right there and just make it hug the radiator a little bit closer so I can get a little bit more clearance for my up pipe to come up into the engine bay. To cut this lower pipe, you're going to have to drain the radiator first because that's going to be filled with coolant. To access the radiator drain plug, you're going to have to remove the passenger side, I guess it's a splash guard, the dust guard thing on the bottom of the engine. Go ahead and remove that. It's just a couple of bolts. So on the passenger side of the radiator underneath the car, there is going to be a little valve right there. I don't know how well y'all can see it, but it's a little turny valve. You could turn probably with your fingers, and that will drain the radiator. There's a little hose coming off of it, and if you're awesome like me, you've got this section of blue hose that you attach so that you can control where it drains. I ended up not even using the blue thing, the blue hose. So yeah, now you're just going to drain all of that. Make sure you properly dispose of it where it needs to go. Because it is such a steady stream, I've actually been able to put an antifreeze bottle underneath it, so it can drain into that instead of an oil pan. You can see the coolant draining from another angle. With all the old coolant out of your car, go ahead and close off that the drain plug, and make sure that you put all of your old antifreeze coolant mixture into a jug and return it to a place that can dispose of it, because it is very hazardous to children, wildlife, etc. Keep Earth clean, recycle. With your radiator drained, it is finally time to remove that lower radiator hose from where it connects to the radiator down there. There is a little clamp on the hose that you have to slide, pinch and slide outwards. But then go ahead and use a screwdriver or whatever to pry that off of the radiator. It would be a good idea to put a catch can of some sort underneath this, because there is some fluid still in this pipe. I'm going to go ahead and cut this right at about there. You just got to make sure that it has enough length to cover the nipple on the radiator and still be able to slide the clamp over, but just go ahead and use a razor knife from underneath and cut that pipe. I'm going to try and use these pipe cutters. They're meant for PVC pipe, but let's see if it'll cut that radiator hose for me. That'd be super cool. I was able to cut most of the way through that hose with those, so that was a good idea. Just going to finish off with some tin snips or my razor blade. This is the section I removed. That should allow me to get 2-3 inches closer to the radiator, allowing me to put my hot pipes in. This is where it was before, and this is after. So that spring clamp was near impossible to get back on, so I have used a worm clamp style hose clamp that I put down on there. But you can see all the space that this gives you right there. It's awesome. After you've reattached the bottom radiator hose, you need to refill it with between a 50% to 70% antifreeze, and go ahead and burp the system. So this is the broken piece of pipe that I need to get re-welded to make sure that all my lines lined up. I put a tire iron across there and sprayed on either side, so I'll have a line to make sure that it lines up straight the way it should after I cut it and weld it. So that's got to be fixed because I snapped that one. So I took my pipes to an exhaust shop that I've used before, called S&S Custom Exhaust, and they welded for me. They said that the weld itself was too rotted around the weld for them just to weld it back together. So what they did is they gave me this collar. They welded a collar of pipe around it, which not only fixed it, but also probably strengthened the area a lot more because it's a lot thicker. I don't think I can show you guys down in there, but so that should do its job. Hoping that that flange is still exactly where I need it to be. If not, I have to get my downpipe extended anyway because it's a little bit short. So this shop could adjust my flange on that if need be. So now I'm going to work on getting this up into the car. I am now going to attempt to put the hot pipes for the turbo up pipe up into the engine bay. Just check the fitment. I don't have the wastegate on there right now because it needs to be put in after it clears the transmission. Alright, so about now is when you're going to want to install the header primaries. They attach to the block, and unfortunately I can't show you guys this because I've already done them. I'm keeping my headers from my naturally aspirated primaries. I'm keeping those in there because they fit my turbo setup. But basically you're going to undo the old one and put in the new one. It's pretty straightforward. It does suck because there is no room. I'm sorry I can't show you guys that. It sucks even worse on the rear. So go ahead and have fun getting your primaries in there. When you put your exhaust flanges up there, make sure that you use your Permatex Ultra Copper gasket maker on both sides of the gasket. That's what I'm doing before I put it up to the things. So I got the up pipe into the engine bay, and the downpipe is right there up next to it. To get this in there, I actually had to bend this clutch line. You can't really see, but there's this line to, I think it's the clutch slave cylinder, maybe it's the master cylinder. It's a hard line, and I actually bent that with my hand a little bit to get this in there. This isn't attached down below, but that does fit where the turbo goes. I was able to sit it there to take some pictures, and now I am switching my my regular zip ties for stainless steel ones so the exhaust doesn't melt them off, and I got some new bolts, and we're going to try and get this turbo mounted tonight, and also customing up a bracket to take some strain off of the pipes. Right now I'm using this baling wire to wrap around my my heat wrapped parts instead of using stainless steel zip ties. You can see how I've done it right there, but I guess you guys couldn't really see that because I only have one hand, so I can't focus it. It's freezing cold. This is the coldest day we've had so far in Florida. It actually snowed today. Like, what? And I'm out here in shorts and a t-shirt working on my car. But I got the flanges in, both of them. Let's see. Yeah, and now I'm going to work on just finishing off all this header wrap so that it doesn't fall off once I get some heat through these pipes. So I got the it wrapped there and there. Done a little bit on the downpipe, working my way up into the engine bay. Alright, so I've got the turbo in. It's not bolted up, but those bolts are a lot closer together. Those two flanges, once I put the gasket on there, it should clear. My only problem is that it's sitting right on that edge, so I don't know how I'm going to be able to get a hose around that, like a coupler. We'll see what I end up doing as far as that goes, but I may end up grinding off a little bit of this shelf piece, or I might end up finding a way to space that up a little bit. But there's the downpipe. It's going to connect on that side. Yeah, I think right now I'm actually going to take out this turbo and clean it up a little bit so it doesn't look so grimy. So this is your wastegate. It allows the exhaust gas to bypass the turbo for the most part once you reach a certain boost pressure. How it works is there's a spring inside here set. It's a certain PSI spring that holds down with a certain amount of pressure, and when the pressure coming into here, maybe it's here, not sure, but when the pressure going into here, I believe, overpowers the spring, so once you get over 4 psi, because I got a 4 psi spring, this will open, and this little plunger down there will move up and allow the gas to bypass the turbo and just sort of dump right out there. So this has to go on after you get the hot pipes in, because you can't get them to clear the transmission without it. So right now we're going to work on putting this onto the exhaust pipes. This is a shot from underneath of where you're going to mount your wastegate, and it's going to sit right about up in there. So there's the wastegate. Let's mount it up to the up pipe. Get your shot from up top. Well, there she is. That's the wastegate. This downpipe is not over where it should be yet, so those won't actually be touching. It's still got some play in it, but that's where it's gonna sit. Yep. Alright, so what I've done to fix my clearance issue is gotten a second flange from a local guy for cheap, and put a gasket and gasket material in between the flange and the original flange, just to sort of push up the turbo a ½ inch or a little bit more. So I'm going to get another gasket to go on top of that, and then I'm going to be able to push the turbo, and the downpipe does have enough room to be able to lift up enough. Yeah, so that should fix my clearance issues with this frame edge piece here. With that flange on, I reset the turbo back on where it would go, and it's actually sitting all the way on that flange where it should. All the bolt holes are lined up, and the downpipe is ready to be bolted on. The oil feed and drain are in the right orientation where they should be. You want them to be as straight vertical as possible. whatever method you have to use. I put a coupler on the inlet side of the turbo already because it is very close to this shelf thing. It's not actually touching, which is good, but it's very, very close. It's also now that little bump is touching this overflow container, so I think I might have to put I'm going to put a couple layers of header wrap just sort of in between there to keep the temperature a little bit lower on that. Otherwise I'm going to have to relocate that to somewhere else. But I'll let you guys know what I do with that. And I still have to figure on making a bracket for this. But as of now, that's how it's situated in the engine bay, at least. I got the oil lines hooked up. You'll see that in a separate video. But now the next thing we need to do is to get that downpipe attached and get it mounted on the up pipe. So that's the next task I'm going to tackle here. You'll also notice that I've painted the exhaust housing black with some 1200 degree grill paint. Looks much better. But you're going to want to put a gasket and gasket sealant on both of these surfaces. I already have one on there. And then basically bolt it through. I got extra long bolts because I put another flange there to space it up. But I just hate working with bolts that are too short. So I got some extra long ones. They're pretty long. And I got lock washers and nuts that fit for each one of those, so we're going to try and get those through, but it's probably going to be terrible because there's no room to work in this engine bay. But let's go ahead and get that mounted. 4 nuts and 4 lock washers. Once you got the gasket and the peanut butter in place, you can go ahead and bolt that on. With the bolts in, it's time to do the fun bit and spin the nuts onto the bottom. Get ready to cut up your hands and curse a lot. Also, it's raining, which is making everything fun because it's winter and it's freezing cold, even though it isn't here in Florida. Okay, that's 2 of the nuts are on already. It's not as hard as I thought with as long as you use a long extension and you hold the bolts down below and you spin them up top. The lock washers tend to stop them from spinning when they don't want to be spun. These should be a little bit easier, but maybe a little bit harder. Let's tackle those next. Just tightening them finger tight, then go let it sit for an hour and let the Primatex Ultra copper set up, and trying to keep my camera dry here. So I cut myself, you guys can't see it very well, but there's a cut there, as well as cuts all the way up there, and a slice there as well. Yeah, and in this hand I sliced my thumb and that finger. Just a word of caution, the gaskets and the edges of cut metal things are very, very sharp, and they will slice you without you even noticing it. This is not fun. It stings. All 4 bolts are in. The little cover for that came off, but don't worry, I have the battery disconnected anyway. Now we're going to let it sit for an hour and then come back and tighten down those bolts. Right now I'm working on getting the downpipe bolted up to the turbo. I'm putting in this bottom stud before all the other ones, because the bottom of the downpipe flange has one of the bolt holes that is cut out, and I believe that is because it makes such a sharp angle right off of the flange that it would be really hard to get that bolt in there. So I'm going to half thread that in there and sort of like pick this up and slot it over that, and then put a couple other bolts in there, and then I should be able to reach that bottom one from down below with a crescent wrench. But let's see how this goes. With a gasket and gasket sealant, you can go ahead and attach the downpipe. The downpipe was hitting the transmission and making it so that I couldn't line up the flange for the turbo, so we're going to cut it here. And since I was already going to have it re-welded back there, I'll just have the exhaust shop, fix whatever connections don't work, but we're going to cut it here so that we got a little bit more wiggle room so we can get that flange on. Got that.
Is there anything in the way there? Nope.
You're almost there. There we go.
Ooh!
With that part cut, your downpipe will move by itself. No. Alright, with that cut, we're able to move it a lot easier, and it should line up right. So, with that, my downpipe bolts are in, and I've finger tightened this with the gasket. Right now, my downpipe stops there. It's just open. That'll work until I get it to an exhaust shop. But then I've got to connect it back to that thing. Yeah, for the most part, that's it. This has been how to install turbo headers on a 1994 Mazda MX6. Thanks for watching.